civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Allora ci siamo, buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti a questo incontro.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session entitled Dante's Words in Our Times. We have three distinguished with us. His Excellence Msgr Massimo Camisasca, Bishop Emeritus of Reggio Emilia Guastalla. Welcome, Father Massimo. Thank you for being here. Then we have Aldo Cazzullo, special correspondent, journalist and writer of Corriere della Sera, who has come back with us after a few years. Thank you for being here with us, Aldo. And Franco Nembrini. He doesn't need to be introduced. Is with us. Has been with us for many years and has been speaking about Dante for many years. So welcome, Franco. I just want to remind you some of their works among the many that they have made. And these works have made them famous and distinguished scholars and experts among the public at large on Dante. Franco Nembrini, Nel mezzo del Cambin, there were 34 episodes on TV 2000 to interpret the Divine Comedy, and then the great books by Mondadori with Gabriele Dell'Otto and Alessandro D'Avenia, and the recent exhibition in Verona that was much beloved. As for Aldo Cazzullo, is the author of A rivedere le stelle, Dante il poeta che inventò l'Italia by Mondadori, and the latest one, Il posto degli uomini, Dante in Purgatorio, dove andremo tutti. He also presented Dante on different stages in the main Italian cities. He organized the shows together with the Tuscan musician and rocker Piero Pelù. The books by Aldo Cazzullo and Nembrini can be found at the exit, and maybe they will also be able to find some copies. In addition to Camisasca's book, he, for many years, talked about Dante with us. He said that some of his verses have become famous and have been with us forever. In 2021, the year of Dante's centenary, we have seen that Dante is still arousing interest throughout the world, 700 years after his death. The celebrations and initiatives have been manifold. But throughout the 20th century and at the beginning of the year 2000, we have seen that this poet had become a standpoint, a benchmark, not just for scholars, but for many writers and Nobel Prize winners. Dante was a model, starting from Eliot, Eugenio Montale, Milosz, Walcott. Many artists focused on Dante, and I can only recall Renato Guttuso and Salvador Dalì. Starting from 1989, Federico Tiezzi and Sandro Lombardi put Dante on stage with 3 shows in collaboration with the great poets Sanguinetti, Mario Luzzi, and Giovanni Giudici. And in 1981, Cambero Bene had read some of the cantos of the Divine Comedy on the Torre degli Asinelli in Bologna to celebrate the tolls of Bologna's accident. And after the end of the Second World War, Primo Levi and other authors recalled Dante through the Shoah. I can also recall the initiatives by Marco Dattinelli and Teatro delle Albe di Ravenna. And last year, the meeting here in Rimini organized a session on Mi ritrovai dalla selva oscura al paradiso that was also followed from Italian cities. Dante was recalled and in different ways. We can all recall the success of Dante's readings by Roberto Benigni on television. Everybody watched it. And also many singers and pop and rock groups, bands, have recalled Dante and his world with the songs and symphonies and albums. For example, Nirvana with Kurt Cobain. It's the wonderful writings and speeches by Don Giussani are recalled by all of us. He talked about the last canto of the Paradiso, whose contents had become a way to think about theology. Why is Dante arousing all this interest and this curiosity in man today? This is what we want to ask our guests, and we will discuss this with them. We have not invited the 3 Dante's scholars, but a theologist, a scholar, and a professor, a journalist and a professor, in order to see how Dante is modern and topical in the 3 cantos. And so I will give now the floor to Franco Nembrini, that will be talking about the Inferno.
Pronto? Sì. Sì, si sente? Difficile.
It is a daunting task for me, but I'll do it very fast so that I will give some time to the real scholars and those who know Dante very well and much better than me. I'll make it simple, because when you ask the question, what can Dante say to today's man, to the man of today, I will give an autobiographical answer. I will give you an answer based on what I've seen in my teachings in the past few years. To this kind of question, I can only answer by telling you my encounter with Dante when I was 11 years old. Due to family reasons, I'm the 4th one of 10 children. I was asked to help the family. So in the summer, when I was 11, I was sent to work in a delicatessen shop in Bergamo, and I came from a little village. So due to different reasons, from Monday morning to Saturday night, I stopped in the house of the owners of this shop where I was working. That year, I had a wonderful professor in 6th grade, and I fell in love with literature. And you can all remember that we went those years to go to school. We learned, and then we came back. This is no longer the case. But at that time, we used to study by heart the most beautiful pieces of literature. So full cantos by heart. This is what we did. This is what we studied. So while I was working, I was far from home, and I sort of lived in exile. In the summer, I should have gone on holiday, but actually I had to work, and it was hard work. I was working the whole day. And therefore, I was complaining about my sad destiny, and I lived a sort of exile where I had to work very hard. I sometimes sent letter home in order to talk about my sufferings, and I could never find the words. So this is the secret. I couldn't find the words. I couldn't find the words that could describe what I was feeling until one night, 10 o'clock at night, I was about to go to bed, and the shop owner told me that I had to download a lorry full of drinks and wines, and nobody could do it. And so I was wearing my pajamas. I put my clothes back again, and I went down to download the lorry. I was going up and down through the stairs to download the lorry, and I was suffering, and I was crying because of my sad destiny. And a miracle happened, and that time was somewhat linked to providence. A miracle happened because while I was going up and down the stairs with all these goods that I had to download, I got in my mind a verse that I had learned by heart, where Cacciaguida predicts the exile to Dante. And I cried. I cried, but I cried out of emotion. So I went back home. I was 11 years old. And I went to see my professor, my friends, my parents, to tell them what I had found out. Dante speaking about me. Dante speaking about me because I said to myself, but how can Dante know what I am feeling now? So I could find the words in 3 verses. I could find exactly what I was living. So I felt embraced. I felt understood by someone. I was not alone. I was not alone. And the drama I was living was shared by someone, by a great writer like Dante. Then I found out that even Manzoni talked about me, all the hard talked about me. I was, myself was at the origin of my love for literature and for teaching. So since that time, I've always wanted to be a teacher of Italian. And this can also be witnessed by my spiritual father. I've always wanted to teach. Because I felt that some other people could live what I lived, as in they could experience the discovery of Dante's modernity. So that confirmed that the Divine Comedy is totally topical, is totally modern, because I think I've read the Divine Comedy everywhere. I read Dante on different occasions, on thousands of occasions, thousands of opportunities in Kazakhstan, Sierra Leone, in Chicago, and Trescore Balneare, a little village in Italy. So I read the Divine Comedy everywhere in the world, but that was the beginning. Because for the first, when I I started to teach Italian, what could my contribution be? I had all doubts, I had all fears, because I didn't study much. I didn't know much now then, and I don't know much now. But I knew that I could tell my students, rather not tell, I could live before my students the encounter that every day I had with Dante reading the Divine Comedy. And this is the secret of the reason why it is easy for me to tell things to people. So since I started teaching, there was this wonderful thing that happened. there was a class of in a technical school. They were studying accountancy, and to these students, I was teaching Dolce Stil Novo and the Divine Comedy. And at the back of the class, there was a tall guy. He was sitting with a chair on the wall, and apparently he was asleep. Probably, I don't know, he had taken something, I don't know. And I was presenting Dante and the second canto of Inferno. I went back to class after finishing the first canto of Inferno, and I said, so what do you think about reading this way of reading Dante? And that guy raised his hand and said, I want you to ask me, I want you to test me on that. And all the class burst out into a laugh. Everybody laughed and said, okay, come here. Prof, I know it by heart. I know it by heart. And he didn't even say it properly in Italian. I know the first canto by heart. Everybody burst into a laugh, and he was very serious. And he started to say, when I journeyed half of our life's way, and he went through all the canto by heart, no mistakes made. Everybody shut up. And I said, okay, well done. I gave him the maximum mark. I think that was the best mark ever he got. And I said, but Signor, but why? I didn't even ask you to study the first canto by heart. And he told me, Prof, it's too good, too beautiful in dialect, too cool. And there I understood that Dante has a power of communication of the human experience and of its complexity and of the complexity of the human being, that he can also arouse the interest, or even better, the desire of any man, any kind of man, anywhere he or she is from. And this is what I've seen going around the world, telling Dante, explaining Dante to people. Two more remarks. Sometimes journalists ask me, just like you have just been doing, how can 15-year-old people now be interested in Dante, because they're always on their mobile phones? And I've always said, my problem is not to arouse the interest in the youth. To the youth, you need to teach being tender with themselves. They need to learn to find their heart, to ask themselves the right questions. So Dante can be proposed as something interesting, as a story which is worth telling, which is worth knowing. And in order to do so, this must also be true and consistent with the teacher himself. I don't want to seem presumptuous here, but I realize that what I owe to Don Giussani and to being a member of Communion and Liberation, and to feel so close to Don Massimo, and I'm not saying to flatter him, I've learned that we need to talk and to speak to the people around us. Life is opening our eyes, looking. The most common word in the Divine Comedy is the word look. Everything that has to do with the eyes. The word eyes is the most common word in the Divine Comedy. You have to look, use your eyes to look at reality. And in order to do that, you need to ask yourselves questions. All the secret of man's education lies on the continuous dialogue between our greatest desires, our heart, which is a beloved word by Jews, and the context around and the reality. Life is vocation, hence is responsibility. life is a reality through which we're called by mystery, and we try to answer. And therefore, it is interesting to read Dante, not just for the students, but for you, for yourself. And I will now stop a bit on the Inferno, as I was asked. If we had the time, and you would ask me to read the canto I like most, I would read the 33rd of the Paradiso and the 2nd of the Inferno, because everything starts in the Inferno. The human adventure, the human journey starts in the Inferno, and we can acknowledge ourselves in the Inferno. So if I read to you the 2nd canto of the Inferno, and we can hear together Virgilio talking to Dante in order to give him the courage that he does not have to lead life, and encounter with Beatrice, this girl that reaches Virgil in the Inferno to save her man. After the first 6 verses, I will be forgetting about you, like I forget about my students, because I cannot read that canto without thinking about my encounter with Grazia and my wedding with Grazia and what this represents for me. So I learned something about my relation with Grazia by reading that encounter in the Inferno. That encounter where a woman goes to hell in order to rescue her man. And here I can see my story, my teachers, my masters, my fatigue, the wolf that brings you to the desert and to the sea. But somebody comes up and you can give him mercy. That mercy that from the beginning of the Inferno until the end of the Divine Comedy is always there to be present. Even in life, if the day does not start from miserere, from telling friends, okay, let's travel a piece of the journey together, because on my own I cannot do it because the wolf is going to win against me. What can we do? I mean, every relation is based on the miserere. Every joy, every fecundity of life is based and starts from miserere. So to me, reading the 2nd canto is wonderful. Then, all of a sudden, you realize that you have in front of you 30 students. At the beginning, they were paid no attention at all. You know what young people do. They always sit in the back or on the side of the class, the furthest, as far away as possible from the teacher. And at some point, while reading the canto, they get closer and closer to you. Then you look at them and you say, okay, students, what do you think about the love of a woman going to hell in order to rescue her man every single day? And I can swear to you, even the worst student in the class is looking at you, and if he doesn't have tears, if he's not crying, is saying, yes, it's true. I would like to be loved like this. So it's hard, but there's a moment of truth where all students are moved, are thrilled by somebody that concerns them directly. They feel attracted, they feel fascinated, they feel charmed. And so the teacher has to propose that canto rather than going away, rather than talking together without listening to the teacher. Something happens. The teacher reads the canto, and they shut up and then they listen to you. And this happens everywhere if you read Dante, in the cities, in the squares, everywhere. So, and this is the only way it can be. Dante is so modern, is so topical, and is so universal that event can happen, that Dante can understand the man's desire and can talk about the man's desires. I was in Kazakhstan, and I was with some professors from Kazakhstan, and I was talking about Dante. And I said to myself, I'm in Karaganda. So if you look at Karaganda in the map, it's in the region of Kyrgyzia. And Leopardi wrote the Canto Notturno because he had read the report of a correspondent, a journalist, talking about shepherds from Kyrgyzstan. And he got this idea of writing the Canto Notturno. And then I said, I want to give you a present. I will give you a gift. I'm going to read a poet that is telling about your grandparents. And I read the Canto Notturno that was read by myself from the north of Italy, Leopardi, in a totally different language to people from Kyrgyzstan. And in the end, there was silence. And probably I said to myself, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe somebody got offended. So I said, am I wrong? Maybe I've offended you. A lady raised up. She was Muslim. She had a veil. And she was in the first row. She was a teacher. And she stood up and said, I want to say something. So she started crying, standing, but very discreet crying. She just had some tears coming down from her eyes. And she said, yes, I want to say this. I am that shepherd. I am that shepherd. And this is the nice song of A Wandering Shepherd in Asia by Giacomo Leopardi. And if you read this to anyone, people understand. They have an encounter with that canto, with that poem, because it's very modern, because it's very topical. Then you need to explain to them. But he described the heart of man so deep that he can interpret anybody's heart. And Inferno has a special feature. It's clear. Since the beginning, it is crystal clear that every Inferno, every hell you're living, Sierra Leone, for example, at the time, or Ukraine right now. I've just met a dear friend of mine, Father Alexander, an Orthodox priest who managed to escape from Kherson 1 week ago. He was under the bombings until 1 week ago and is now here with us. And for 5 years, I organized the Dante Fest in Kharkiv. For 5 years. Because Inferno says it from the beginning. The shadowed forest, whatever shadowed forest it is, there is no shadowed forest from which you cannot get out. And the last word of the Inferno is not the dark, is not condemnation, but it's the stars. Then we got out and we saw the stars. This is the last verse of the Inferno. I found you to talk to you about the other things I have found. There in the shadowed forest, I'm going to tell you the shadowed forest, not because I want you to come into hell with me, not to share my suffering and desperation, but to share my hope. And looking at the evil directly, calling things by their name, and understanding the truth, I was able to tackle the evil and escape from it. So come through the shadowed forest with me, and together we will come out from the forest to see the stars. The young people that organized the exhibition entitled the exhibition 100 My Own Inferno, My Own Hell, subtitle, You Can Get Out and See the Stars Again, in order to make, let's say, that was a metaphor for the fact of coming out from the pandemic. So my inferno, my hell, your inferno, your hell is not what comes in the end. What comes in the end is what the other speakers will say, talking about the Purgatorio and Paradiso.
Aldo Cazzullo, a te.
Aldo Cazzullo, now over to you to hear from the Purgatory. Thank you, Letizia. Thank you for your introduction, and thanks to the meeting organizers, and thanks to you all for being here, so many of you. I would have never come to listen to me, even more so with President Draghi finishing his speech, but I would have come to listen to Nembrini and Camisasca for sure. I'm very grateful to Massimo Camisasca and Franco Nembrini. We initially thought we can have 20 minutes each about Inferno, Paradise and Purgatory. In the book by Nembrini, I found many points of inspiration. The first, in the opening part of the Divine Comedy, I find it when I had journeyed half of our life's way, and it is our life's way. That's the key word. Dante immediately tells us that he's talking about us. The story talks about you. It is about you. It concerns you as a human being, because the Divine Comedy is not just an ultra-terrestrial journey. It is a journey inside the human soul and up until the border. And Dante is totally incomprehensible outside of a perspective of faith, hope, and salvation. At the same time, it concerns us as Italian people, because Dante is the man who invents Italy, not as a state, but as a heritage of beauty, of culture, of values. For Dante, Italy had a mission, reconciling the Rome of Caesars with the Rome of the popes, that is laity and Christianity. And with this encounter, humanism was born, which is still the most important movement in Italy today and in the world. Why our army is considered the best as in mission peacekeeping operations? Not because they have powerful weapons, but because they have the capacity to listen to and to respect the local populations. And these values are originating in the great humanistic culture that started with Dante. Well, my duty is the most difficult one, because the Purgatory is considered to be the most unfortunate canticle in a way. The Purgatory is not so considered so interesting, but it is beautiful. I consider it a place of people, the place of men, because I say our mothers go to the paradise, our enemies to hell, but to us, we can go to the Purgatory. It's the more humane place, the one that resembles life mostly. And Dante is the inventor of the Purgatory, even if we think that none of us is so evil to deserve directly the hell, but not even so good to deserve directly paradise. So it's spontaneous to think of this middle place. But the Church established the existence of the Purgatory just a few years before Dante started writing, and nobody knew how it was made of. It was thought that it was a milder version of the Inferno, of hell, and Dante invented it. And this moving in nothing, in void, exalted to the highest level his fantasy, his creativity. So Dante is not a mild Inferno, it is the opposite of the Inferno. In Inferno there is despair, in Purgatory there is hope. In the Inferno one goes down, in the Purgatory one goes up. The Inferno is dark, Purgatory is full of light, colors. In hell there's a cry, swearing. In Purgatory there are chants and melodies and psalms, and especially there is time. The Inferno is forever as well as paradise, but in Purgatory there is the sun rising and the sun setting, just like on earth. But the difference is that in life, time gets us closer to death, but in Purgatory it gets us closer to God, to salvation. And Dante imagines a cosmogony, a theory on the birth of the universe. Lucifer, the head of rebel angels, defeated by angels loyal to God, fell to the earth that horrified, opened itself not to avoid it, and he went down to the center of Italy, where he finds Judah, Bruto, and Cassio, that the great betrayers, and on the other side of the world, the mountain, the Purgatory mountain, was created. That is divided in 7 circles, each one for each capital sin. There are people there that are punished for their sins, and the iracundus, there are all kinds of capital sins that are represented by people having to pay for their sins in different ways. And Dante asks Virgil, how can a soul lose weight? The gluttony, of course, are punished by eating a lot. And so God recreates a sort of shadow that follows in the afterworld the immortal soul that can laugh, can cry, and can lose weight. Dante says that in the face of every person there is this word "homo" that defines the face, like the 2 O's. It's the word "homo" that defines the face, like the 2 O's. It's the 2 eyes, and then the M shape in the 2 eyebrows and the cheeks. And so that's the kind of shape that can be seen with this word. And then there is the lustful that have to burn in the fire. And then at the top there is the Eden, where Dante finds Beatrice again. He doesn't see her, but he feels her, and he trembles because of the emotion, the excitement. And Virgil had to leave in the meantime and says that I don't have any part of my body that cannot tremble. I recognize the seeds of the ancient flame. But Beatrice is angry, got offended. She doesn't look at Dante because she accuses him to have forgotten her and to find another woman after her death. We don't know whether she refers to an allegorical woman like philosophy or a real woman. I believe it was a real woman, in fact, or both of them. Yeah, I think it's both. Massimo got it right. The point is that Dante bursts into tears, and so Beatrice looks at him, forgives him, and Dante finds her even more beautiful than he could remember, and together they fly through the skies of paradise before the face of God. Dante asks to be allowed to contemplate God's face. St. Bernard asks for this intercession to the Virgin Mother, Son of your Son, the most beautiful prayer. And the grace is awarded so Dante can contemplate God's face, but he cannot remember it, he cannot describe it. Human words cannot describe God. But Dante knows that he saw him, so it's just like when we wake up all of a sudden, we can't remember our dream, but we know that we were dreaming, and images just disappears like snow under the sun, or prophecies like leaves sent away with the wind. And Dante remembers that he could see the human face, man's face, because we are made in the face of God. And this I learned in a Simone Christic's show in Rome. We were 35 people in the theater, and Italian TV organized nothing for celebrating 700 years of the death of Dante. What did Italian fiction do for celebrating Dante? Nothing. Now we even have fictions about any comedian, but now the cultural world was not really interested in proposing content about Dante, but now, yes, we are having content about it. We could continue talking about the Purgatory all day, but I'm just going to mention a couple of stories that I really like. One is about a young lady. You know that theologians were discussing whether women had or not a soul. But Dante describes that the human species overcomes everything on earth thanks to woman. It is the woman that saves the man. It is Beatrice that rescues Dante. As Nembrini said, it is a chain of women when Dante gets lost in the shadowed forest that starts looking for him and saving. The Virgin goes to St. Lucy. He was very devoted to St. Lucy, protector of the sight, because of the eye problems he had when he was young. So Beatrice gets down from paradise to Inferno because she's not affected by that. The verb tangere in Italian is taken from this text of the Divine Comedy, or stare fresco, stare solo soletto, cosa fatta capo a, avviso aperto, grande rifiuto. All these expressions are taken from the Dante. There are many expressions that are taken from the Divine Comedy to say, mind your own businesses. And Beatrice trusts Virgil to accompany Dante, and he took him to the top of the mountain, to the Purgatory, and gets him back to Beatrice, and there he drinks the water of 2 rivers, deleted, that will get him forget the evil that he made, and the Noé, that is the strength of the good made, and he flies to paradise, and Don Massimo then will talk about this. In the whole of the Divine Comedy, there is just one character taking care of Dante that gets worried about him. You know that care is a key word of our time. We were created. Care is a key word of our time. We were created by the Cura goddess. She took the mud and shaped it, asked Jupiter to blow soul in it, and then created man. And Cura said, I made it. And Jupiter said, no, it's mine because I gave him soul. But it is the earth. This is mud. I made it with mud. It is mine, said God. And so a compromise was made. After the death, the body will go back to earth, and the soul will belong to the Cura goddess, to a woman. So there is just one character taking care of Dante. It's a woman. It's a very sweet woman, Pia of Ptolemaeus, that is there just for 6 verses. All we know about this character is in those 6 verses that have turned into thousands and thousands of pages, because generations of writers try to imagine who she was. Marguerite Yourcenar, the greatest French novelist, and Carolina Invernizio, a very popular Italian writer, wrote books about that. And Pia says to Dante, when you get back to the world and rest in this long way, remember that who I am, the third soul. I was born in Siena and died in Ravenna. And in the last 2 verses, there is the solution of this mystery. He who, when we were wed, gave his pledge, and then as nuptial ring his gem knows that. And Pia de Ptolemy was murdered by a jealous husband, just like Francesca of Rimini, who was from Ravenna, from the Ravenna area. She had to marry Gianciotto Malatesta, the son of the Lord of Rimini, to make peace between the 2 families and the 2 cities. However, Gianciotto is ugly and has a beautiful brother, Paolo. Paolo and Francesca, as you know, fall in love, and they find they are in love reading a book. Another novel that tells an impossible love, Lancelot and Ginevra, the wife of King Arthur. And when the 2 read about the kiss between Lancelot and Ginevra, they recognize their story and the one in the book, and Paul kisses Francesca. These parts, these verses are really known. Sorry for making an incursion into the Inferno, but I wanted to mention this too. And it's also talk about love. It is love from ancient poems that mentions the fact that there is love everywhere. And Amor que nulla amato, amor perdona is one of the most famous verses in literature. It was used also by pop singers of our time. I don't know if it is like this. That is that if love that is not returned cannot be really expressed to somebody else. There are also unreturned love. But where is sin? What is the sin? Why is Francesca in Inferno? And so there is this explanation in the Purgatory of the theory of love, because it says that there is no creature without love. We were all born to love, just like bees make honey and wax without anyone teaching them how to make it. The wax can be good, but there can be false stamps that may disguise letters, making them look original while they are false. So love can be good, or love can be towards wrong things or wrong persons. And also, the other verse is very interesting about the assassination of Francesca. It is about Caina, the most terrible place of Inferno, where all traitors are punished. At the end of Inferno, there is no fire because it warms. There is ice that is the symbol of hatred and despair. It is there that, according to Dante, ends up for those that are evil against women, because the violence against women is not just about a problem for women, it's also a problem for men. It is men that have to change, and that change in the way they see the body and the soul of women, because they are not owner of women. And the other story I want to mention is about the encounter between Dante and Manfredi. You know that Dante wonders about the evil. At the end, there are devils, and he invents the names of devils, and he's really skilled. Malacoda is the head that gathers his partners to create a team of 10 devils, and Alechino, Calcabrina, or Cagnazzo, and Barbariccia, or Libicocco, and Draghignazzo, Ciriatto, Zannuto, Graffiacane, and Farfarello, and Rubicante Pazzo. All these names were invented by Dante. They resound the comedy of art. They really make us laugh even. They're not really scaring, but they show that evil is part of man, is inside man. And Manfredi mentions to Dante that his sins were horrible, but goodness is infinite, and so they hug each other. Manfredi got excommunicated, and the Pope called the French to defeat the army headed by Manfredi. And the French, the Angevins, defeated Manfredi and killed him. They killed him, hitting him in the face and in the chest. Manfredi, Dante describes Manfredi in this way, as a fair-haired man, beautiful, but with a blow, clear visible, received in his head. So the French recognize his value, and they all put a stone on his body. But the Pope, that hated him, ordered them to disperse the remains of this person. And talking about his bones, he mentioned, bathed by rain, the wind now blows them around. And in San Benedetto, he said that his father was getting his first rain for his father. It was raining all over the Langhe up in San Benedetto. My father was getting wet underground for the first time. This is from The Ruin by Fenoglio. And so we have a parallel here between a king that fell in a battle or another character. They both suffered, but their soul is saved, because the destiny of man is not decided by the Pope, even by a Pope. It's decided by God. If we say sorry, we can go to Purgatory, and if we do well, we can go to paradise. That will present the environment that Massimo will talk about. Two final points now. In the Divine Comedy, we can find all the literature that will come. Dante wrote about a podestà in Firenze that was really bad, and refers to him with words that can be found in The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare. Never more shall I touch the sacred shores. The ode to Giacinto by Foscolo starts like this, like the words in Purgatory. Women, knights, arms, love, and courtesies, and brave deeds I sing. This is the beginning of the Orlando Furioso by Ariosto, and this is taken literally from the Purgatory by Dante. We're like leaves on branches in autumn, a poem by Ungaretti, and Dante, to give an idea of this mass of souls that are transported by Caronte, he compared them to leaves that are falling down from a tree. And then there is also references in movies with Diego Ambatantuono and shouting to someone that they are sending them to Barbagia, an area that is also mentioned in Dante's work. And talking about the stars, we find a citation in Nembrini's work, and also we find it in a work by Borges. Well, Nembrini, we know him, and also Borges wrote something interesting indeed. And he wrote that the Divine Comedy is the most beautiful book ever written by men, considering that the other book was the Bible written by God. So the most beautiful book written by men was written by an Italian person in our language. And so this should remind us that being Italian is not something bad, as many young people now think. Being Italian is an opportunity, because it means that we can live in the bel paese, as Dante said first. And being Italian is also a responsibility. It means keeping up to the heritage that is unique in the world, for beauty, for values, Christian values that we inherited from our mothers and fathers, and we have to be proud of that. That's why Dante Alighieri talks about us and reminds us that being Italian is a really big strike of luck. Thank you.
Don Massimo, ascoltiamo le tue riflessioni.
Father Massimo, okay, your remarks on the third canto. Good afternoon to you all, to those of you who are in the room and those of you who are connected. I know that there are many of you. And I see that I think that we're watching a concert, a sort of symphony between three parts, or a concert, three different notes. As maybe you have understood by listening to Nembrini and Cazzullo, and you will understand by listening to me. And this comes from different experiences. The educational experience of Nembrini, the verses known by heart from Cazzullo, and I'm the conductor who wants to have sheets under the eyes. And I asked myself, to us, men of the third millennium, who no longer seem to have any hope for the future, think about the demographic crisis concerning not only Italy, but especially Italy, I would have to say no. But this is tragedy. If I think about the fear that has dominated the past 2 years and that is now inside us like a disease that we cannot win, if I think about a problem in accepting sacrifice, this is why I was struck by most of the interviews on television made to our athletes who won the European Swimming and Athletics Championships, who bore witness of sacrifice, because you cannot win. You cannot win without sacrifice. It is difficult to cross pain. It is difficult to accept your own limits. Well, Dante's Paradise is above all an hymn to courage, an invitation to never despair, to always attempt a new navigation, on one condition, that we have a suitable boat and crew. This is the prerequisite imposed by Dante. There must be other companions, and there must be a boat enabling you to cross the sky to reach God. And reason is not enough for that. What advice does Dante have for us to rekindle hope in our hearts? The main basis of Dante's experience and the Paradiso's experience can be summed up in the word attraction. Attraction raises to Paradiso, to paradise, by attraction. It is attracted by the look and the smile of Beatrice. What are the real attractions of life? So this is the question in the Paradiso. Man wants to discover the main attractions in life positively, and that can make you go forward. In Virgilio's Bucoliche, everyone is attracted by what he likes. The paradise is a journey that consists in surrendering to attraction, to the attraction of Beatrice's gaze and the light that accompanies her smile. So it is an invitation to hope, to surrender to attraction, real attraction. It is not utopia, nor an illusion, but this is a journey that was made by Dante. Dante's journey is the journey made by Dante as a man. This is no fiction. The two things, Dante is always a man. A path that Dante actually took from the lowest lake of bewilderment and laceration caused in him by the victory of the passions bent on evil. As he said, and I quote, "Pride, envy, and avarice are the three sparks that have the choirs alight." Dante's betrayal is not a poetic device. As Aldo said beforehand, he has really betrayed. Otherwise, it would all be a fairy tale. That pragmatic sense, which is in the Divine Comedy, speaks about the life of this man that he led day by day. Evil is not literature, not even in Dostoevsky. And above all, in great literature, evil is no literature, but it's life that is lived, life that is really led. It is the sad victory of war over peace, of darkness over light, and despair over hope. The great announcement that the reader of Dante's Paradise receives is that one can rise from the abyss. One can open up to goodness, to truth, to God. And this is possible not because man can find in himself the strength for this journey, but because it is God himself who attracts us to himself by using other men and women. So the paradise, in paradise, men and women, we can find the paradise because we can find it through men and women on his journey. So our task in life is to find men and women attracting us to the light. Dante shows us that we're not alone, and that by accepting the help of those who love us, we can write a new page in our personal history and in the history of the world. As Dante said, God's existence is at the heart of all that. If God does not if there's no God attracting us, then there's no way out. And if there's no prospect of a life that ends, Dante said the most unreasonable thing is that everything stops with death. Dante can accomplish his journey because he believes that God exists and that human history has a meaning, cosmic and personal meaning. And the cosmic meaning is within the meaning of each one of us. In Dante, there's no difference between the star and the man. Man is inhabited by stars and by destiny, by the cosmos. And not even the decision to exclude God from the horizon of man and life is enough to eliminate the tension of human nature towards the eternal. Man has always sought to overcome his limit in space and time. He's always sought to distance himself as far as possible from death, from his own death and the death of things. Writing in itself, what is writing? What is figurative art, if not a yearning to leave something of us? And here the contradiction lies, man alone with his intelligence and strength cannot conquer death, cannot adequately respond to the desire for eternity that is within his heart. Dante's Paradiso puts this tension at the heart, at the center. So how can we tackle this challenge between the yearning of the infinite in our inability to find it? This tension is enshrined into one single word invented by Dante, where we can see the very challenge of every man's existence. This word, which is transhumanare, in the first canto of the Paradiso. Transhumanare, in passing beyond. Transhumanare, significare passing beyond the human cannot be worded. This is transhumanare. Man's desire to become like God without forgetting anything about his humanity, because no one is able to forget himself in meeting God while continuing to be a man. Transhumanare means to remain human, but to let fall what is provisional, transient in us. This is the experience of incarnation, which is the heart of the Paradiso. God became man so that man might become God. The ancient Latin poet had already written Homo homini Deus, but it was only a wish. Dante's Transhumanar is no longer just a wish, but describe Jesus' journey accomplished in the incarnation. Transhumanar indicates the ultimate meaning of life. Man lives to transcend himself, to be the butterfly as opposed to the caterpillar, the tree as opposed to the seed, the statue as opposed to the sketch, the painting or fresco as opposed to the sketch or synopia. The word transhumanar intercepts another one, which is contemporary to us. And this is what Dante says today, transhumanar. But transhumanar intercepts another one, which is almost identical, but very distant, as in transhumanism. Nick Bostrom, the Swedish philosopher, president of the World Transhumanist Association, defines it, and I quote, as a cultural, intellectual, and a scientific movement, which affirms the moral duty to improve the physical and cognitive capacities of the human species and to apply new technologies to human beings so that we can eliminate undesired and unnecessary features of the human condition, such as suffering, illness, aging, and even being mortal. This definition of transhumanism raises radical ethical questions, and a question: what do we actually mean when speaking of enhancement of man, of transhumanar? What is the boundary between transhuman and post-human? Will transhumanism kill the human? Bostrom illustrates this, saying that the transhuman is only a preparatory phase of the post-human. The transhuman is a being with psychological, intellectual, and physical characteristics as superior to the normal. The post-human, on the other end, Bostrom says, is a being whose life expectancy could be 500 years, cognitive capacity twice as much the present-day man, control of sensory input, no psychological suffering, as in an entity that is more perfect than the human being and the transhuman. A post-human could enjoy an extension of life without deterioration. But what life? We'll see that later on. Would have greater intellectual capacity, would be more intelligent than others, would have a body consistent with his desires, could make copies of himself, and would have total emotional control. And this is Descartes' ancient project. What is important in man is not the body, which is a machine, but the mind. For the doctrine of artificial intelligence, man is a being where everything that is not machine, as in thoughts, feelings, affections, emotions, and choices, can be reduced to information, and this transferred to a single hardware that allows us to get rid of what is bodily. The word transhumanism that was invented in 1957 by UNESCO's first Director General, the biologist Julian Huxley, is actually linguistic device to avoid the word eugenism, which became almost impossible to use after Nazi eugenism. But in essence, it means the same thing: the overcoming of human limits, the redemption of man through science and technology, a technique that has long been no longer neutral, no longer a means, but its own end. The transhumanism, posthumanism project is the wrong answer to a right question: how to overcome death. an answer that is not only inadequate but also dangerous, because it presupposes the annihilation of man as a relationship, as reason and freedom, because thoughts, feelings will purely be put into an hardware. Man as a will, but especially man as a body and as a tension to give life. It was funny and tragic for me to read, while I was preparing this speech, many texts on transhumanism talking about younger people renouncing sexuality because they could have the possibility to do sex only through artificial intelligence. To Pierpaolo Donati, in his essay on Man, a social being, highlights how the presupposition of transhumanist philosophy is the elimination of the social bond. And Galimberti writes, the result is extreme loneliness, a society in which the interpersonal exchange has a solipsistic trend, where an infinite number of mass hermits, and I underline mass hermits, communicate views of the world as it appears from the hermitage, separated from each other, closed in their shells. And this analysis by Galimberti is very smart. It is no coincidence that one of the key words in transhumanist jargon is singularity, meaning an incorporeal existence in the form of pure information installed on an external hardware. An existence where human beings are platform independent and can achieve an intramundane eternity, meant not as an eternity, but as the possibility of a time that does not end. Just imagine Father Massimo, Don Massimo, in 3,000 years. What can Dante say to contemporary transhumanism? While transhumanism, to respond to the thirst for eternity inherent in human nature, reduces man to his cerebral information, as it downgrades man to the level of machines, Dante's Transhumanar raises man beyond his limits without annihilating anything of his humanity. Transhumanar is an exit from the self, which does not deny anything of the human, let alone the body. It is no coincidence that one of Dante's pagan masters, quoted in Paradise, is Ovid, with his Metamorphoses. The most seductive literary text opens the reader's imagination to the event of Transhumanar. How astonishing then to read Dante's invocation to Apollo. Enter into my breast, within me breathe the very power you made manifest, when you drew Marsyas out from his lymph sheath. We also have to change skin, because we cannot be overdressed, but we don't have to change the body. Again, at the beginning of the Paradise, and quoting the Metamorphoses, Dante speaks of Glaucus, who hated an herb that transformed him into a sea deity. In watching her, within me I was changed as Glaucus changed, tasting the herb that made him a companion of the other sea gods. I would never have quoted this verse because Dante here is translating a word from the second letter of St. Peter, consorte divisus naturae, the only time in the Testament where it says that we will be consorts, as in we will have the same fate, nature, destiny as God, with his déplacement, very capable, whereby the Christian gods can be seen by mythology. Dante experiences this rebirth, the reversal of his nature as a man, by looking into the eyes of Beatrice. So, in contrast to transhumanist philosophy, it teaches us that it is only the gaze of another that can make us transhumanize. While we see ourselves only for what we are, those who love us look at us for what we're made for. Thank you.
Grazie davvero per questi meravigliosi.
Thank you very much for these wonderful presentations. I would like to conclude by mentioning Gianfranco Contini's words, one of the greatest experts of Dante in the 20th century, from one of his essays of 1965 that says, Dante is far away in time in the conception of things for the epoch he's living, is evidence of his vital closeness. The genuine impression of the readers meeting with Dante is not to clash into something that cannot be experienced, but to join someone who came before him. So before saying goodbye to our guests and give them a round of applause, I remind you all that you can support the meeting by donating at the Dona Ora desks. You can find them where this red heart sign is visible. So please do support the meeting by donating. I thank very much our guests and I wish you all a very good meeting. Thank you.
Se qualcuno volesse...
Bene, ti è piaciuto?
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.